Have you ever experienced betrayal sting? It's a painful pill to take, and the effects linger longer than the depths of the ocean. Along the way, my best friend Barry and I discovered a web of lies hatched by Sheila and Greta, our own wives. Barry and I successfully navigated the stormy waters of betrayal by working together and showing solidarity. Our goal was to uncover our wives' infidelity and recover justice. This is my narrative. Take pleasure in viewing it. That was one of those Sunday mornings when all I wanted to do was go to Home Depot and kill time. Even though I knew I was supposed to be at church, this seemed like a lot more fun. I didn't really need anything, but this seemed like the best use of my time because I didn't like playing golf. Hopefully, there would be a sale on grass and seed by the end of the year. I was able to get 4 bags for a quarter of the usual price 2 years ago. "John, how nice to see you here," Barry Bartell said. We weren't very close, but it was still nice to grab coffee and talk, even though I hadn't seen him in almost a year. Interestingly, tomorrow morning my wife Sheila and Barry's wife Greta were leaving for a week-long Caribbean cruise. Sheila decided that I should stay home with the kids so that she and Greta could enjoy their beach vacation together, since Barry was unable to take time off work to join them. I would be the third wheel, she insisted. The 2 women could split the cost of a cabin as well. Even though I wasn't thrilled about it, I refrained from arguing. After a brief hello, we started to look around the pest control division. "I'm sure you can all see where this is heading," I said. "John, I'm sorry to hear that you couldn't take time off work for the cruise. I was really looking forward to it. Why was that?" It was him who was unable to take time off. What had he expected? "Oh, Barry, I've already taken a week off. I'll use the time to paint the kitchen while the ladies are away." Sheila informed me that you couldn't take time off work. Barry and I stood there looking at each other in silence. "I work for my father, John. I can leave whenever I want." I was getting ready when Greta told me you couldn't make it. One of those motorized carts was being driven by an elderly person, breaking the silence. I pushed my cart aside and asked Barry, "Are you two going to stand here all day? Would you like to go grab some coffee?" With a certainty, we visited McDonald's for the next 2 hours. We had no trouble figuring out that our wives had plotted to take a 7-day cruise around the Caribbean without us. What was their motivation was the main question. Until we finally snapped, neither of us addressed the apparent. It was similar to that famous metaphor of the elephant in the room. I eventually decided to take the lead. "So, Barry, are they bringing along 2 men, or are they intending to meet a couple of strangers?" He paused before answering. I guess he didn't even want to consider that there might be an answer. "John, would you like a Danish pastry?" I could tell he was trying to avoid answering the question, even though he wasn't purposefully dodging it. I picked up my empty coffee cup and nodded in agreement. We had 2 hot cups of coffee and 2 freshly baked buns 5 minutes later. "John, I can't fathom Greta engaging with a stranger, so we'll have to arrange some sort of pre-planned encounter." I agree, as much as I hate to say it. I don't understand why they would travel to do these kinds of things. Surely it would be easier to locate someone nearby. Maybe it would. To be honest with you, I don't monitor Greta's behavior or whereabouts. I've always had faith in her and have never given the thought to the possibility that she might be seeing someone else. Why would 2 moms whose kids were in school even consider doing this? It was so hot that we gave up trying to take a sip of our coffee, even though we both wanted to. We put down our cups and looked out the window. Barry made a reasonable observation, saying, "John, it's probably a couple of men from their workplace." Sheila and Greta were employed at International Casualty Insurance. "Is there anything we can do to prevent this, Barry? If they are comfortable enough with these men to go on a cruise with them, we are probably already too late." "What do you mean? Do you think they have already been unfaithful?" Barry got up and moved to the service counter, saying, "I hate to say it, but I'm beginning to think so." After a minute, he came back. We each added some ice to our scalding coffee and said, "Damn it. They charged 27 cents for a glass of ice. Why did we even come here?" It was a few moments before either of us said anything. John, now that I think about it, Greg has been working extra hours. A lot lately, both in the evenings and on weekends. I hadn't really considered it before. I must admit I'm starting to see your point. I won't prevent Sheila from going, but I won't just sit idly either. I ate the last of my Danish pastry and threw the leftover coffee in the garbage. Barry, let's meet here tomorrow right after the girls depart for the airport. We have some planning to do. Be careful not to say anything to Greta that might indicate you're aware of what's happening. Barry gave me a thumbs up as I headed out the entrance. He appeared to be planning to stay and consume his coffee. When I got home, he didn't look happy. Everything appeared to be quite typical. Our two boys, 10-year-old Jason and 9-year-old Todd, were glued to the television. Though I had long since given up on the notion, I still felt they belonged outside. Sheila was acting exactly like she usually did. As she cooked a belated lunch, I sat and read the paper. I thought she would talk to me about her trip, but she didn't seem to want to talk about it. Of course, that was fascinating in and of itself. I finally took the boys outside to play soccer after lunch. Sheila was busy packing her things inside in the meantime. So that she could leave without any problems in the morning, she insisted on having everything ready. I gave the house a few sidelong glances while grinning. How was it that I missed this? How stupid had I been? Why didn't I realize this sooner? Todd, Jason, I'll be occupied painting the house next week while your mother is away. What do you think about spending that week with Grandma and Grandpa Connor? I responded immediately. Both of them raced over to the house, and in 10 minutes, they were packing. 20 miles outside of town, on a farm, lived my parents and their horses. It wasn't too challenging. Sheila complained a little, but she didn't seem to be in the mood to stir up a fuss. My wife had started preparing dinner when I got home. Sheila changed her clothes and headed to the shower. This, of course, gave me a chance to quickly check her bags. I noticed 3 things that confirmed my suspicions. First of all, given that she was spending time with Greta, the majority of her sleeping gear seemed strange. The finding of a brand new orange bikini thoughtfully tucked away in her cosmetics bag raised a second red flag. The discovery of 210 condom packs hidden in a case, however, was the most concerning discovery. Why my wife would bring condoms on a cruise was beyond me. I was angry with myself for even imagining such a thing. Before the trip, Sheila had expressed her desire for a restful night's sleep, while I had made the decision to binge-watch a ton of Steven Seagal films. Sadly, unlike Sheila, who had a work phone with international coverage, I didn't have international coverage on my cell phone. She promised to check in with her family every day or in the event of any problems, even though I was unable to reach her. I assured her not to worry, saying that I might be painting or hanging out with the boys at my parents' house if I didn't respond. She appeared relieved by my reply. Greta was waiting for me at the terminal, grinning and waving at me as I dropped Sheila off. I was looking forward to seeing Barry as Sheila joined her. Barry came over to us with a few cups of coffee after I had parked and bemoaned the ice. Barry begged, "John, please tell me you have some good news." Unfortunately, all I could do was shake my head. Greta had brought along some embarrassing lingerie and 2 new dresses. Even worse, I found a brand new bikini and a large quantity of condoms. I had not even considered looking through her makeup bag. I was not sure if I should have been relieved that I had not found anything or disappointed that I had not looked further. For the next 20 minutes, Barry and I bemoaned our situation. After we had consumed all of our coffee, it was time to get to work. We went to International Casualty Insurance first, telling the receptionist that we were there to interview the head of human resources, Kermit Templeton. Kermit and I had been friends since our high school years. Though we didn't exactly have a close friendship, we got along. "Oh no," Kermit exclaimed upon seeing us. Barry and I plopped down in our uncomfortable chairs and said, "Could you please close the door?" "Do you know why we're here, Kermit?" I responded. "I think I have a pretty good idea," Kermit answered. I smiled at Barry, but Kermit didn't seem to be having any fun. We were hoping you could provide us with a number of employees who have been on vacation this week. Is that a question? Our grins turned to frowns. Kermit started typing on his computer, which immediately changed his mood. With a sigh, he spoke of Greta and Sheila. 14 employees are on vacation. Can you print out a list for us? I replied. No, but I can give you the information you need, Kermit replied. After typing a few more commands, Kermit's printer came to life next to him and produced 2 sheets of paper for us. He waited for our response. The pages included information about Calvin Bostic and Clayton Mank. After a brief perusal of the paperwork, Barry and I turned to Kermit. That was your question. Out of curiosity, do you know the pairings? These 2 are on the same cruise as Greta and Sheila. There's no need to see the rest of the list. Kermit hesitated to answer, putting a picture of Calvin in front of Barry and another in front of me. Kermit stammered to reply, "Does anyone else know about this?" but gave up after a while. Everyone is aware. I thought the company had a policy against such situations. Yes, but it only applies if there's a complaint. And then what? Usually just a warning. And if we push for more, you're not planning to complicate things for me, are you? I glanced at Barry. We didn't say anything, but it was obvious that we agreed. Kermit, if those 4 individuals are still employed here next week, we will take legal action. We don't have all the details yet, but it's inevitable. We will arrange for our attorney to reach out to you or your legal department, depending on your preference. Any inquiries? I apologize for this situation. We did not take any action as the relationship was consensual. No one was coerced or forced into anything. Although we are uncertain about the extent of the relationship, we acknowledge its existence. We refrained from taking any action since no one had lodged a complaint until now. Yes, Kermit, it is official. You terminate all 4 of us, and we will not retaliate. If no action is taken, you should anticipate a lawsuit, and it will be a highly publicized one. Before we left, Barry and I took a stand. We went out the main door and shook hands with Kermit. So, what do we do now? Barry asked, glancing at me. I think we should meet with the lawyer first. After lunch, we can go to the local travel agency. Barry then abruptly stopped as we were pulling into the parking lot and making our way to the lawyer's office. I shrugged as I looked at him. What's the matter, John? What exactly are we going to ask the lawyer to do for us? What do you mean? Well, I think once we step through that door, it will come at a significant cost, and all we'll end up with is a lighter wallet. We'll be divorced. We'll be free from those unfaithful women. Ponder on it. We'll be obligated to pay both of them alimony. We'll be compelled to continue making mortgage payments. We'll be forced to relinquish custody of the children and subsequently pay child support. All the unpaid bills will be piled onto us, and the court will likely mandate that we provide our wives with credit cards and cell phones. By the time it concludes, we will also have to finance our children's college education. And what do we gain from it? Nothing, as far as I can discern. Why on earth would any rational person choose to get a divorce? The only reason I can think of is to maintain contact with his children. That's the entire trade-off. Damn it, Barry. After what happened, the most just course of action would be to entrust the children to our care and hold them accountable. However, it seems highly unlikely that such a resolution will ever come to fruition, does it not? I can't help but feel as though I am being coerced. Both of us stood in silence amidst the parking lot. I love my kids. I don't want to lose them. I understand exactly how you feel. I would be devastated if I couldn't see my daughters again. However, I don't want to suffer financial ruin simply because my wife was unfaithful. We turned and walked back to our cars, saying, John, who on earth is responsible for creating these unjust laws? It is incredibly unfair. Barry, I must admit that Sheila is an exceptional mother. If I were to have children, I doubt I could match her level of competence. Yes, I understand. The same can be said for Greta. She is a devoted mother, and the girls adore her. It pains me to say it, but she would make a better parent than I ever could, we said. Yet I just kick at the fine gravel underfoot while Barry fiddles with his jacket zipper. John, how about we go get some ribs? We split the whole amount and drank 3 beers between us to kill time before moving on to coffee and bowls of banana pudding. When we were sober enough to drive, we headed to the reliable Good Times travel agency, owned by Nancy Raburn, an old family friend turned former family friend, whose skill at trip planning and organization was the only reason she was still in business these days. Loyalty was the only thing keeping her afloat after the internet had all but eliminated her competitors. When we got to the office, she didn't even have to say it. Barry and I sat down, grinning, watching the means of our destruction. The 2 agents sitting next to Nancy excused themselves for lunch right away. One of them had a brown bag on his desk. The office was obviously aware of what was happening and was trying to keep a distance from it. We waited, not saying a word, while Nancy grinned and tried, in vain, to find solace in her chair. Eventually, she lost it. Barry and I looked at each other, laughing loudly enough for Nancy to hear, and I said, leaning in to speak quietly, "How may I help you gentlemen today? You have 5 minutes to tell us everything, or we'll make such a mess that the police have to come clean and treat your office like a crime scene." Barry got up and turned to face the entrance of the office. 2 other agents and a couple making travel plans were there. "Listen up, everyone. I suggest you vacate the premises for a few minutes, as we will be rearranging the furniture." "John, Barry, hold on, all right. What on earth do you want? Just don't get me or the office into trouble. I don't need any unwanted attention. Come on, gentlemen, cut me some slack. I won't divulge anything more than what your wives have already told you. You wouldn't do anything foolish, would you?" Barry motioned for everyone to relax and return to their seats. "Nancy, who else is accompanying Sheila and Greta?" "John, there are more than 1,000 passengers on the ship. You understand what I'm asking?" "Nancy, who else from International Casualty is on this ship?" Good Times, the travel agency, was a franchise. Nancy has faced some issues over the past year. She doesn't want any more information to come to light. "It's not what I asked, is it?" "Damn it, John, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want from me? Which rooms are Calvin Bozick and Clayton Mann staying?" Nancy hesitated for a moment, her concerned expression matching her slight stammer. Just as I slammed my fist on the desk, Nancy and the other 2 travel agents sitting up front jumped back in surprise. The 2 clients silently got up and walked away. "I'll tear this place apart if I have to, Nancy." "Damn it, Nancy, what room are those 2 in? Answer me now and stop playing games." "Bozick and Mank are in room 115 on the sunset deck," she said, her voice barely audible. Barry leaned over the table and met Nancy's gaze. He said firmly, "Nancy, Calvin is sharing a room with my wife, Greta." She trembled and attempted to push her chair away from the table. "Responding to your query, Greta and Calvin are currently sharing a room," she said, her voice barely audible. Calvin's frustration was evident as he forcefully struck the tabletop. "It is confirmed that both Greta and Calvin are in room 113, while Sheila and Clayton occupy room 115. However, I must emphasize that I am not the one responsible for this arrangement. It was ordered by someone else." "I simply followed their instructions," Nancy said, realizing she had divulged too much information. Abruptly halting her sentence, she then proceeded to retrieve the requested documents and handed them over to us. It was difficult to determine if she had shed tears, but as we prepared to leave, I turned to her and emphasized the importance of not contacting anyone, whether on the ship or elsewhere, regarding our presence or our conversation. I warned her that such actions would result in dire consequences for her business. Exiting the building, Barry expressed his uncertainty about how we would proceed. I admitted that I had no concrete plan. It had simply seemed like a good idea at the time. Barry made the decision to leave his 2 daughters, Grace and Marie, in the care of his sister, Beth, who also had 2 teenage girls. Once everything was settled, he intended to join us at the house. We dedicated the evening to reviewing brochures and schedules, which facilitated the development of our plan. We both acknowledged that our marriages were irreparable, and our primary concern became the well-being of our children. We loved them dearly and contemplated how the divorce would impact their lives, particularly in terms of our respective responsibilities. We mutually agreed that there would be no official divorce proceedings. Instead, we would individually determine how to care for our children. I hoped that once the dust settled, I could arrange to live with Sheila and the kids. Naturally, I would ensure their basic needs were met, but I had no intention of financially supporting Sheila. All of this required careful planning and effort. If everything goes according to plan, I intend to cover their college tuition as well. This evening, we had to make a decision on how to handle the immediate issues. Fortunately, there was complimentary Wi-Fi available on the cruise ship. Barry planned to bring his laptop and download all the contact information of our friends, relatives, and coworkers, including addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses. Dealing with cell phones would still be a challenge, but we didn't want to bother with that at the moment. The cruise ship was scheduled to arrive in Montego Bay on Wednesday morning. We managed to find an affordable sightseeing flight that would bring us there by 7 a.m. on that day. Booking a room for the duration of the cruise turned out to be much simpler than we had anticipated. It took less than an hour to arrange a flight to Jamaica and reserve a room for the return journey. Sheila called and left a message informing us that they had settled into their cabin without any issues and were already at sea. She asked me to inform Barry that Greta was also on board. The evening was just beginning, and we were almost ready to depart. We planned to spend most of the following day organizing our financial and personal matters, such as bank accounts, bills, credit cards, and personal belongings. I intended to take all my belongings to my parents' house for safekeeping while Barry's brother would take care of his things. Fortunately, a kind colleague from work allowed us to park our cars at his place and gave us a ride to the airport. Although leaving at midnight was not ideal, it was necessary. The airport was only a short taxi ride away from the cruise ship parking lot. We watched as the sun set behind the market stall. All we had with us were 2 carry-on bags and Barry's laptop. We didn't plan on dressing up, so we only brought the bare minimum of clothing. Just 10 minutes later, people began disembarking from the ship. Some headed straight to the town center, while most made their way to the waiting tour buses in an orderly fashion. Everything seemed well coordinated, as if it had been done countless times before. Sheila and Greta walked along the walkway with wide smiles on their faces. The 2 gentlemen standing behind them appeared equally delighted as they intertwined their hands. It was evident that Clayton and Calvin were the individuals in question. They were attractive men, perhaps a few years younger than Barry and myself, but certainly not displaying stereotypically masculine hands. We observed them from our small stools until they all boarded the bus destined for Dunn's River Falls. Barry greeted the ticket collector with a wave, exchanged a few words with the driver, and then approached us. Jamaicans are known for their bargaining skills. It took us approximately 5 minutes to persuade him to assist us, along with a payment of $1,200. Identifying Sheila and Greta to our newfound acquaintance posed no difficulty, and he gladly agreed to capture as many photographs as possible of the 2 couples at the falls. When we expressed our desire for slightly more daring pictures, he grinned and gave us a thumbs up. The bus was scheduled to return at 3 o'clock, and we assured him that we would wait with the agreed payment. He smiled once more and carefully emphasized the quality of his camera, then he winked. We realized that he required an additional $200 more than the value of a $40 camera. Once the bus had departed, we boarded to settle into our room for an additional $100. The obliging clerk registered us under the names Bob Jones and James Moore. If everything went smoothly, we would remain incognito for the remainder of the cruise. We quickly grabbed a bite to eat, consisting of sandwiches, and then spent the rest of the day acquainting ourselves with the layout of the ship. Within a couple of hours, we had familiarized ourselves with all the stairs, elevators, and passageways. We intended to avoid the dining room and showroom to prevent any accidental encounters with our wives. Barry set up his laptop and conducted some tests. Fortunately, we encountered no issues with internet access or email. We discussed the possibility of breaking into our wives' rooms, but ultimately decided against it. As we comfortably sat in the same booth as before, the buses began to return, and the bus to Dunn's River Falls arrived promptly as scheduled. Barry and I were enjoying a couple of glasses of Red Label when Sheila, Greta, and their companions walked past us. The straw hats we wore likely aided in concealing our identities to some extent. Our ticket collector approached us, grinning from ear to ear. There was a wealth of joy in that smile. He couldn't wait to showcase his work and wouldn't cease talking about how excellently he had done everything. However, Barry interrupted his enthusiasm by handing him a cold beer. It only took a few moments to glance at the photographs. There was much more affectionate embracing and kissing captured in them than we could have anticipated. I handed him $1,200 and another beer for the driver. We waited a few more minutes to ensure the wives had safely left the boarding area, then we made our way back to the cabin. We had a busy evening planned, but first, we needed to figure out how to discreetly have dinner. The cabin boasted a balcony that overlooked the entrance to the main dining room. Barry and I settled into comfortable seats where we could observe the passengers queuing up for their meals. We speculated that the wives would prefer an early dinner, allowing them more time for evening activities like dancing and entertainment. It didn't take long before the four of them arrived and joined the line. The couple strolled hand in hand, and no one would have suspected they weren't married. Barry gave me a puzzled look as I stood up and walked over to the service phone within 30 seconds. I returned with a wide grin on my face. The couples were just about to be seated when the announcement rang out, "Attention, Barry Barrel, please join your party on the Leo deck." Barry Bartell. It wasn't an excessively loud or bothersome announcement, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Greta immediately turned her head as if there was an invisible loudspeaker in front of her. She stepped aside to allow the next group of seated individuals to pass by. Greta and Sheila were engaged in an animated conversation while Clayton and Calvin patiently stood to the side. Suddenly, Greta retrieved her cell phone and dialed a number from her speed dial. After 30 seconds, she shook her head indicating that there was no answer. Sheila followed suit and made the call. After Sheila's call went unanswered, both attendants grew concerned and proceeded to enter the dining room. John, that was truly impressive. I would give anything to have overheard the conversation during that meal. Despite how childish it may have sounded, we exchanged greetings and then headed to the sunset deck to enjoy tacos and margaritas. An hour later, we returned to our room ready to begin our work. Today was a crucial day as we were scheduled to arrive in Cancun the following morning. Neither of our homes received any response when we tried calling, and no one was aware that we were out of town. Even if they had attempted to contact us, whether it was my parents or Barry's brother, there was no way for them to know our whereabouts. We transferred all the pictures from Dunn's River Falls onto the laptop. Some of the photos captured all four of us, while most depicted couples. A few of them showed intimate moments with Sheila sporting a new orange bikini that seemed to have caused a few wardrobe malfunctions. On our way to the falls, each time she would giggle. Although a video would have been ideal, we had to make do with what we had. Barry created a collage page featuring the best dozen shots. Naturally, Clayton and Calvin appeared in all of them. Each of us selected our favorite photo, which Barry then included in an e-card. The message read, "Having a great time. Wish you were here." By 9 o'clock, we had sent out over 200 emails. I was astonished by the number of friends, family, and social contacts we had collectively. Naturally, everyone at International Casualty received a set of photos. The sky deck was incredibly windy and nearly deserted. Barry and I managed to find a quiet, secluded corner where we enjoyed 3 long-necked beers, reveling in the success of our first day. We had no clue what we would do the next day, but since the page trick had worked so well, we decided to give it another shot. We retired to bed early. The ship offered an abundance of fruit, danishes, and coffee for breakfast. We purposely avoided the main dining areas and the most crowded common spaces. Instead, we utilized the service stairways rather than the elevators. Barry and I were enjoying a refreshing rum drink with pineapple on the sun deck at the back. From there, we had a clear view of the main pool, which was gradually becoming more crowded. As we sipped on our second drink, Sheila and Greta joined us, settling comfortably into a couple of lounge chairs. However, Clayton and Calvin were nowhere to be found. Uncertain of what to do, we simply observed. At the other end of the deck, there was a bored-looking teenager engrossed in his cell phone. I always found it fascinating how quickly teenagers could send text messages on those devices. I nudged Barry, and together we approached the young guy. We were faced with the challenge of approaching a boy on a cruise ship without appearing strange. It was an awkward situation, but we managed to navigate through it. Eventually, he agreed to let us use his cell phone for a fee of $20. Hello? Hi, Sheila, it's John. I apologize for not being able to answer your call last night. I tried calling home 3 times. John, your phone indicates you're calling from Baltimore. I'm sorry, but I had to borrow this phone. You know I can't make calls from mine. Is everything all right, John? Your parents had no idea where you were. I'm fine, just busy. Are you having a good time? Yeah, we're having a fantastic time. It's a shame you couldn't join us. All right, please say hi to Greta for me. Before I let you go, I need to return the phone to its owner. By the way, I wanted to mention that you look stunning in that orange bikini. I don't recall seeing it before. Bye. JN and I burst into laughter as I ended the call and handed the phone back to its owner. Barry and I decided to block Sheila and Greta's numbers on their phones. I gave the teenager another $20 and reminded him to keep our encounter a secret. He thought it was cool and readily agreed. Sheila and Greta were searching all over the ship in an attempt to find me. Sheila tried to conceal herself with a large towel, as if trying to avoid being noticed. It was a foolish move on her part. She attempted to call the number we had used twice, but eventually gave up. Clayton and Calvin arrived a few moments later. Barry proceeded directly to the service phone on the sun deck. Shortly after, he returned to the railing with a broad smile on his face. Attention, Barry Bartell, kindly join your group at the shuffleboard court. Barry Bartell, kindly join your group on the shuffleboard court. Upon hearing this announcement, there was a flurry of activity near the pool. Greta and Sheila swiftly gathered their belongings and made their way to the shuffleboard court on the port side of the yacht. Meanwhile, Clayton and Calvin simply stood there, appearing displeased. We observed our wives intently from above. They waited for half an hour before departing. As they strolled back to their room, Sheila took out her cell phone and made a call. Judging by the expression on her face, we realized that the postcards had arrived home. We were unsure of the person she was speaking to, but it was inconsequential. Everyone who knew us as a couple possessed pictures of Sheila and Greta with their boyfriends. They lingered in the middle of the deck for a few minutes, examining the displays on Sheila's cell phone, before heading towards the cabin deck. Clayton and Calvin attended the evening dinner without their female companions. They spent the remainder of the evening indulging in drinks at the cabaret bar on the lagoon deck. Barry and I occupied a secluded corner throughout the evening, enjoying beer and pizza. They never noticed us. We contemplated whether we should move closer to eavesdrop on their conversation, but ultimately decided against it. Our wives never made an appearance. Around midnight, both of them left the bar in an inebriated state. Several crew members had to assist them back to their cabins. We never discovered how they slept, but it held no significance to us. We were on the sun deck, relishing a breakfast of fresh fruit and coffee when the Diamond Sunset docked in Cancun. Most of the passengers gathered on the promenade deck, eagerly awaiting the day's festivities. We had yet to determine our plans for the day. It seemed rather foolish to us to attempt to follow 2 couples while they were ashore. However, it was inconsequential, as Sheila and Greta were among the first to disembark from the ship with their luggage. They weren't embarking on a day trip, but rather leaving the cruise altogether. While the other tourists were boarding the tour buses, Sheila and Greta hailed a cab and quickly departed. Barry and I exchanged a final greeting, unprepared for this unexpected turn of events. We anticipated our wives would locate us soon, considering the boat's limited size, yet they made no attempt to do so. Clayton and Calvin also exited the ship and boarded a tour bus, leaving us uncertain of their feelings. We savored a leisurely lunch in the sparsely populated dining room. With one more stop before returning to Grand Cayman, we needed to strategize. Perhaps a relaxed lunch in the dining room awaited us later. Despite most passengers being ashore, Sheila and Greta's absence made no difference. The atmosphere became more laid-back and enjoyable. The ship was set to depart Cancun that evening and reach the Cayman Islands the following afternoon. It seemed like the perfect opportunity for a heart-to-heart conversation. Discussing matters with Clayton and Calvin was necessary, but Barry and I were unsure of what to say. As we entered the formal dining room, we noticed our wives and their partners had secured a table for 4 with 2 empty seats. Barry and I waited until Clayton and Calvin were seated before approaching their table and taking a seat. No one objected or questioned our presence. Introductions were in order. "Good evening, gentlemen. I assume you recognize us." I began. Calvin offered a slight nod, while Clayton's expression revealed his displeasure at our arrival. Their reactions varied, with Calvin appearing apprehensive and uncertain, and Clayton clearly irritated. "Gentlemen, Miss Beryl and I will not be joining you for dinner. With only 3 days left on the cruise, we felt it necessary to caution you to exercise caution." I noticed Barry chuckling, but I chose not to acknowledge him. Calvin appeared intrigued, while Clayton seemed increasingly agitated. It is worth noting that 222 individuals go overboard on pleasure cruises annually and are never found. After a brief pause for emphasis, Barry and I rose from our seats and exited the dining area. Although we could hear Calvin talking, we couldn't discern his words. We both opted for tacos and beer for our evening meal. Due to the strong wind, we decided against going out on the deck, but the sunset was stunning through the windows of the living room. "Well, John, that was quite the spectacle. I'm not entirely sure what you were expecting, but you certainly captured their attention." "I'm not sure I did either. Let's reconvene tomorrow and reassess the situation. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned, gentlemen. I am Mr. Sensen. If I may have a moment of your time, please." Barry and I swiveled our chairs to face the imposing Nordic crewman who had approached us. 2 other crew members stood silently nearby. I glanced at Barry. We exchanged smiles before nodding in acknowledgement of this figure of authority. "Am I addressing Mr. Jones and Mr. Moore, or Mr. Beryl and Mr. Connor Beryl and Connor?" There was no point in concealing our identities. Some of our fellow passengers claimed that you threatened to throw them overboard. Can you provide an explanation for their allegations? "No, we did not threaten them. We simply cited statistics on maritime accidents. In fact, we advised them to exercise caution. It was a subtle warning, and you both know it. Why would we do such a thing?" The burly Swede, or whatever his name was, gestured towards a quiet corner of the room, and we all followed suit. "Gentlemen, did you threaten Mr. Bostic and Mr. Mankey?" Barry and I exchanged glances and seemed to reach a consensus on our response. Yes, despite not being phrased as a threat, our words were indeed spoken with that intention. Was there a specific reason behind that perceived threat? Absolutely, and you were certainly a contributing factor to that reason. The expression on his face clearly indicated his anticipation for a more detailed explanation. "Mr. Sorensen, Nordic Cruise Lines arranged for these 2 gentlemen to share cabins with our wives throughout the week. Mr. Bostic was with Mrs. Bartell, while Mr. Mankey shared a stateroom with my wife. It appears that Nordic Cruise Lines is hosting a cruise with entertainment at sea, targeting married women seeking to spend time with their lovers. While I understand that you are likely legally protected from such occurrences, the situation appears quite distressing to me, Mr. Connor. I empathize with your frustration regarding your wife's actions, but surely you do not believe that the cruise line endorses or supports such behavior. We pride ourselves on being a family-oriented company and are committed to maintaining that reputation. Barry and I remained silent in response to his inquiries. Although we did have thoughts to share, we opted to remain quiet at that moment. Both of us reclined in our chairs and exchanged smiles. Despite Sorensen appearing slightly flustered, he maintained control of the conversation. Regrettably, we will need to report this matter to the appropriate authorities. They may have inquiries for you. Which authorities, you may ask? We are currently at sea. Aren't you the authorities in this situation, Mr. Connor? Mr. Barrel? I kindly request that you refrain from interacting with Mr. Mankey and Mr. Bostic for the remainder of the cruise. Can you assure me that you will not cause any disturbances before we reach Miami? Barry and I nodded in agreement, with smiles on our faces. The group departed, leaving us alone in the room. We spent the evening composing emails to various media outlets in the region, embellishing details and even including photos that we knew could not be published. The following morning, we enjoyed a hearty breakfast in the dining area. Clayton and Calvin were absent during the meal. Later, as the ship arrived at the Grand Cayman Islands, we passed by their cabins and noticed the breakfast dishes left outside their doors. We observed Calvin disembarking with his luggage, bidding farewell to the ship. He left his maid behind. Barry and I decided to spend the day on land, although there wasn't much of interest. However, we did have an enjoyable time swimming with the manta rays. It was a fun experience, although my mind kept wandering to thoughts of the crocodile hunter. Surprisingly, it was the only activity during the entire trip that wasn't driven by revenge. In the evening, we once again relished a satisfying dinner. Clayton was nowhere to be found. It crossed my mind that he may have left the ship after us, but I highly doubted it. Barry had received more than 30 email responses to the postcard we had sent out. Most of them were lighthearted, filled with laughter, but a few were serious and criticized our actions as despicable. We were pleased to discover that our intended audience had received our message. Friends and acquaintances found it amusing. However, our family members responded with disapproval. Sheila and Greta had not sent any messages. Tomorrow we would be returning home, so we made sure to fully charge both of our phones before going to bed. We even sent out 32 press releases, despite our lack of knowledge on how to properly prepare and distribute them. Among those press releases, we made sure to send 2 to Piccolo World Tours, the company that owns the Good Time Travel Agency franchise. We may have gone a bit overboard in accusing Nancy Raburn of organizing trips for married housewives to have romantic rendezvous with their boyfriends. We exaggerated the situation to make our point, but we believed she deserved it. The rest of the story ended up in newspapers and was featured on expose TV shows. Hopefully, we will receive some sort of response. It had been a good day, and we had a restful night's sleep. The following morning, we enjoyed breakfast on the Leo deck. Once we finished, Barry switched on his cell phone. I received a single call from my father. We had separated and each made our initial calls since the journey began. Dad, it's John. I noticed you've been trying to reach me. What's happening? Well, son, I assume you have more information about this situation than I do. All I know is that Sheila arrived on Wednesday and took the children with her. You had asked me not to allow her to take them, but I couldn't prevent it. Later, I entered the house, but she was nowhere to be found. The front door was unlocked, so I went inside and searched. Most of her clothes and the children's clothes were gone. It appeared as though she was in a rush to leave. She didn't mention where she was headed. Jason seemed a bit upset about leaving, and I overheard her mention something about Noble's Grove. It seemed to lift his spirits. Sheila's sister, Loretta, resides in Mount Carmel. That's likely where she went. I'll try to find her phone number and give her a call. John, we received the postcard with the photos. Can you explain what's happening? I believe it's quite evident, Dad. Sheila decided to go on a cruise with a former colleague. She left me behind to care for the children while she enjoyed the company of another man. What would you like me to do, Dad? Did you lock the house? Yes, that's all I could think of. Barry and I hadn't planned on returning home immediately, but circumstances have changed. I've decided that Sheila will remain in the house with the children. I have no clue why she left. What are your plans? I'm uncertain, but I think I'll be seeing you in a day or so. I'll keep you updated. In the meantime, thank you for calling. I made my way to pour myself a cup of coffee as Barry continued speaking. He appeared displeased. We both assumed that our wives would be returning home to the children, and we intended to reside elsewhere for a few months while we figured out our next steps. Our plan is to seek employment in the Pensacola region. Barry returned with a despondent look on his face. He took hold of a Danish pastry from the buffet table and settled into the chaise lounge opposite me. Wow, you seem just as thrilled as I am, my travel companion forced a weak smile and hummed. John, she's gone. Greg has left the children with my sister. What? She left the kids? What did she say? According to Beth, she hardly said anything. She thanked Beth for looking after them and then spoke to the girls for a few minutes. Beth mentioned that her car was filled with clothes. I don't know how she found out I left the kids there. She was alone when she left. What about the house? Beth's husband said no one was in the house. All the furniture and belongings were still there, but Greta didn't live there. He didn't go inside, but I assume all her clothes are gone. Things didn't go as planned for me either. Sheila found out that the boys were at my parents' house and took them from there. I think she went to her sister's in Mount Carmel, but I'm not certain. She took all her clothes and the boys' clothes with her. It seems like my house is empty too. We sat in silence for a few moments. Barry looked at me with concern. I know it's early in the morning, but I could use a beer. We spent the remainder of our cruise in the Leo Lounge, drinking more beer than we were accustomed to. As the ship departed, we walked up to the railing and watched the weary passengers heading home. We didn't see the Clayton sail, but the place was quite crowded. The friendly bartender informed us that the lounge was now closed, so we made our way back to our stateroom where we discovered all our belongings packed and lying in the aisle. We were informed that we would be met by authorities to answer for our threatening behavior. We didn't really understand which authorities they were referring to, but it didn't matter. No one escorted us off the ship, and no one was expecting to meet us. It was, to say the least, a letdown. Not that I was disappointed, but we were hoping for a bit of media attention, but none of that materialized. In the airport limousine van, Barry and I occupied the final 2 seats. We felt like we had no choice but to purchase one-way tickets back home without any prior notice, even though they were extremely expensive. On the way back, we didn't say much to each other. Both of us were feeling a little depressed because our plans had gone wrong. Barry's wife had left him, but he still had his kids. Nevertheless, I was childless and without a spouse. It was not a happy sight to return to an empty house. Nowhere in the house or on our phones were there any signs or messages from Sheila. When I finally gave her office a call, I learned that she was no longer employed by International Casualty. I could not be positive, but I figured Greta Clayton and Calvin were out of a job there, too. Sheila spent the remainder of the first day tidying the house and getting rid of items she had outgrown or misplaced. Barry was in a similar situation, with nothing more than the recollections of Greta's short visit. Greta cried, according to Beth, as she left the house. We both stopped using our credit cards and put limits on how we could access our money. Greta could now take care of herself as a grown woman. But Sheila had Todd and Jason, and I had to find a way to support them. Although I was sorry that she had taken them away, I had to accept that she was their mother and had a duty to look out for and nurture them. Greta didn't seem to be brave enough to take that chance. It was a good arrangement in a way, especially for the kids. As might be expected, Barry and his daughters had made themselves at home in their new house and things were gradually getting back to normal. While Barry was at work, Beth looked after the girls and helped him out around the house as much as she could. However, everything in my life had changed. Dinners from the microwave and evenings spent watching TV awaited me. After doing some research, I found out that Calvin Bosk had left town as soon as he was fired. Clayton had lost his job too, but no one knew where he was living or working at the moment. I tried contacting Sheila's sister Loretta to see if she knew what had happened to the kids, but to no avail. Sheila, according to Loretta, had only spent one night there before leaving without telling anyone where she was going. Even though I didn't really believe her, I had no choice but to accept her word until I was told differently. Unexpectedly, Barry and I had become less close. I had no family, but he did, or at least a portion of one. I tried hanging out with him and the girls, but it was never comfortable. I went to the boys' former school's administrative office at the beginning of the new school year. I told them I wanted to make sure the school records for Todd and Jason were transferred properly. I was informed 2 weeks earlier by a very kind young lady that the paperwork had been sent to North Shock Hill Elementary School in Frackville. I thanked her for sharing that information with me. She seemed proud to have done so. Finding Sheila's new cell phone number didn't take long. It took me 3 tries to get her to answer the phone. When it's not being used by someone to avoid talking to you, caller ID is a helpful feature. I ended the talk there and asked her to meet me at the Frackville Mall food court. I waited for her to come for more than 30 minutes. I was determined not to bring it up at all, since this was our first communication since her romantic cruise. When she sat down at the table, the large coffee I had in front of me had become cold. There was no word of greeting between us. I had to end the silence eventually. "I want you and the boys to return to the house," I replied. Sheila stirred uneasily on the mall seat made of hard plastic. Her hands were empty because she hadn't picked up a drink before coming to sit with me. She questioned, "All 4 of you together?" "No, just the boys and you. It's close to my little apartment. Todd and Jason will feel more at ease and familiar in the house. I can see them on a regular basis, and they can return to their previous school. I'm not able to pay for a house. I'll handle the utilities and rent. I'll give you money for groceries and other living expenses. I'll also take care of the boys' school and clothing costs." "What about me?" Sheila inquired. "All right, Sheila, you've grown up. I think you're able to handle things on your own. I have to put my work first. You can set up your schedule to work in the evenings or while the boys are at school, allowing me to keep an eye on them. I'm sure you'll find something to keep yourself busy." For her, it was a mixture of feelings. I'm not sure what she was willing to accept or what her expectations were. Her gaze darted around the shopping center as though she was thinking or looking for something. She was able to see the advantages and disadvantages of this proposal, in my opinion. "It's for the boys, I'll do it. If you're right, it will work out well for them. When are you ready to move forward?" "After the decision has been made, I will leave the property in the coming days, and you are free to move in whenever you'd like." It took less time for the whole conversation than it did for me to spend a few minutes in that uncomfortable chair. "Do you have anything else you would like to talk about, John?" That was my cue to head out. I got up right away and set the empty paper cup down on the table. Before I left them all, I think I saw a small tear form in her eyes, but I'm not sure. I turned to see that she was still seated. The next half year went by with no significant events. After securing employment, Sheila was able to work during the boys' school hours. On weekends, I would leave them at my apartment, and she would take care of them during the work week. Greta sent Barry a divorce petition, or whatever it's called. From Nevada, it was sent. He lived with his daughters, and they seemed to be doing okay. I think his mother and sister were helping him. His work was going more smoothly than he had expected. Unfortunately, I would have to move in order to progress within the company. I hesitated to move, considering the situation. Just as Christmas was drawing near, everything broke down. When I got back to the office after lunch, Todd and Jason were already waiting for me. What's taking place? Why don't you attend the school? Something went wrong with the furnace. All of us were let go. Jason did nothing but stare at his feet as Todd started to explain. When were all of you here? After we got back home, we made the decision to come here. Beneath the mat lay the key. You had the option to arrive sooner. Both of them were fixated on the ground. What's taking place? What are you hiding? Jason made the decision to speak up. He seemed to be stuttering a little bit as he spoke quickly. My mother had left a jar and her bedroom door open when we got home. She and Clayton the man were inside. He was in the sleeping quarters. Yes, Dad, they were having private conversations. They were both doing things you see on the internet while completely naked. I said nothing. How could I put it? How could I take that scary picture out of their minds? Jason reached over to give me his phone. It didn't take me long to verify that everything they had told me was accurate after I saw the pictures. Todd seemed inclined to mention that Sheila had told them not to tell anyone that Clayton had been at the house more than once. She told them they would all have to move back to Frackville if I got angry. After a few more minutes of conversation, we decided that the boys ought to move in with me. I said goodbye and gave them the apartment's keys. I then went to the Human Resources Department in Minot, North Dakota. It might not have looked like a dream vacation spot, but I had a job opening right away and I could take it. I spent several hours dealing with money matters, and then I headed back to the house. The house was empty, the bed unmade, and I assumed Sheila had come home for an afternoon nap, so she must have been at work. I was completely unaware that Clayton was still here. She came in the front door just as I was finishing up with the boys' stuff in the car. John, what is going on? I believed we had a deal. Where are you taking everything that is here? Sheila, the agreement is void and unenforceable. It's me and the boys heading out. All the shouting in the world won't make a difference. John, you can't keep my boys. Not only will the courts not permit it, but neither will I. I'm going to take them. You can go to court and make all the necessary explanations if you want to get custody back. What is the significance of that? With her hands on her hips and a sly smile on her face, she stood with assurance. I set the last bag down on the ground and looked up at my darling wife. What did you have for lunch today, my dear? What purpose does that serve? What makes you even concerned? You don't need to worry about my lunch. She was very confident in herself. By the way, the heating system malfunctioned at school today. I'm sorry, I don't understand. This morning, the school furnace stopped operating. It was lunchtime when all the students were sent home. Sweetheart, I'll ask you again. What lunch did you eat today? Her confidence dissipated as she collapsed onto the living room couch. She just sat there, not saying anything. Before I left, I stopped at the door after picking up the last bag. Jason snapped a few photos. Clayton will require health insurance, so I hope he has it. The last time, I let him off the hook, but this time, he'll pay a price. She just sat there like a zombie, not even crying or fainting. In an attempt to preserve the mood, I refrained from slamming the door. By the end of the week, we had everything packed and had bought a small trailer. When I pulled up to Clayton Mackey's house, the owner said he was gone that day and gave no address. I chose to handle Clayton at a later time. I learned that she had sought legal advice about the boys' custody, but she never made an effort to get in touch with me about it. The boys were happy in their new home, and we quickly made ourselves at home. They never seemed to miss their mother, which is strange. I received divorce papers from Carson City, Nevada, about 6 months later. I didn't offer anything, and she didn't ask for anything. The fact that she didn't fight for custody of her sons has always bothered me. Though I consider it frequently, I never bring it up. I really think that the boys need a mother. I'm going to start looking for a mother next week. Jason and Todd have agreed to help. Hi there. Please feel free to forward these contents to your friends and family if you have found them interesting. Furthermore, in light of YouTube's algorithmic tendency to favor videos with a higher number of likes, a quick click on the like button would greatly aid in the expansion of our podcast's audience. It's also highly recommended to subscribe to the channel in order to receive notifications whenever new content is posted. YouTube will notify you as necessary. I sincerely appreciate your help. Have a fantastic day.